Well, happy Friday, everybody. At least as I'm recording this. Of course, if you were watching or listening later, then happy whatever day this is. Just even to get started, this is some of my iced dim sum tea that I've mentioned in the past. It's oolong plus chrysanthemum plus a little bit of mint for the working man. What was it like hanging out with Antonio Banderas? Didn't get to meet the man as I didn't get to meet him though. Maybe I'll make an AI version of his character so we can hang out. My thumbnail, I have been messing around with different AI arts, as folks who follow the channel might know, and I trained a version of myself that I could insert into various things. I've had fun messing around with it, and the one for this Friday thumbnails is I took a screenshot from the movie The 13th Warrior, which is one of my favorites, and I threw myself in there in one of the scenes, and I swapped myself with Bulvi, who was the first warrior picked. Actually, he was. It's no sorry, and it is very tasty. I think technically the tea that we drink at a dim sum is actually pu'er, which is slightly different than oolong tea, but sometimes I like the oolong. But it's the same general principle, and it is quite good. All right, so this is kind of I'm excited. I am excited because one of the things that I've been wanting to do for a long time is to, not that I dislike going to Reddit and reading Reddit stuff, because that's great, but I've always wanted to use this time preferentially for community stuff, things that we come up with, folks that are here who participate and who have stuff they want to share, and we could talk about that stuff and then go to Reddit when the well runs dry. But it's never really worked out, and that's probably, I'll say it's definitely my fault, but I forget who it was. Was it nothing who suggested actually putting out a call for a specific piece as opposed to just a generic send us something call? Well, I guess he was correct, because I did, and we actually got some stuff in return, and I posted at the top of the chat the feedback submission post forum, the feedback submission post forum post, whatever. It's the link to the forums you can go where you can see. And I'm probably going to keep this one post, and I don't know how big these forum posts get. If they get too unwieldy, I'll make another one, but probably after this I'll think about something else, or maybe I'll leave it up to you guys to vote on something else, and we can try to get submissions again. I'm actually fine. I mean, I think ideally, if I could have my druthers, I wouldn't have to put specific calls, and people would just come and flood the thread with stuff. But until that day comes, which it may never come, I'll probably prompt for maybe specific things. So the specific call I put out, I guess sometime last week, was for magic items. And we got some. Now, these are all, and I don't know if I don't want to get too in the weeds. I don't know how everyone feels about things. Obviously, I do know that in the OSR, particular stuff goes in the blogosphere and everyone grabs it, makes their own versions of it, right? Iterates on it. And I think nobody generally has a problem with it. I hope, obviously, if you post it to the forums, I'm going to share it. I'm going to talk about it. I don't know if at some point it's worth, if folks want to, I don't know, claim certain things as their own, or I don't know, right? I have no ownership over these. These are being shared by folks, and they're goodwill. Nothing technical has been said about them in terms of usage or whatnot. So, I guess at the bare minimum, if you, and a lot of folks in the OSR make things and they create things and they sell things, if you reach out to these folks, if something inspires you and you end up doing something commercial with it, I guess. But we haven't, as far as I know, all of these are, the rights and the things all rest with the individual people. It's not mine. I have no ownership over anything except the thing that I posted. So I haven't put any disclaimer about, if you posted here, it's Creative Commons or whatever. I was just thinking about that today. I don't know if I want to, but be kind to our fellow creators, right? Okay. So Dungeon Master Masterclass pointed that an item that they very much enjoyed employing was called the Arming Sword of Leadership in their game. The players got a big kick out of it. It has a fun power and led to an interesting cultural/social interaction. Son of Sofa Man says it was posted on the internet. It's fair game now. Oh boy, if only. This is the notation that I'm going to just keep speaking in the first person, obviously. So I'm just going to, when I was reading these, I'm going to speak to the first person because sometimes it gets kind of trippy trying to convert it to the third person. So back to my quoting of Dungeon Master Masterclass. This is the notation I use on all my magic items. We play in a homebrew game, so I'll sort of explain things below, but you don't need to understand the mechanics. It's called the Arming Sword of Leadership. This arming sword has a simple flat crossguard and a hilt wrapped in black leather. It's got something called Miracle-Ignimus, res 50%, id plus 10%, plus 8% to hit, plus 3 to damage, plus 0 to speed. Owner's height increases by 4 inches. The Miracle-Ignimus means that the item was imbued by priest magic, not wizard magic. Ignimus denotes the specific faith. Res is basically an item's saving throw. Id is our ID. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be ID or id. Is a modifier that is basically how easy or hard it is to learn the item's powers. So maybe it is ID. Each bullet point is a magical property of the item. All the players like that a magical item called the Arming Sword of Leadership didn't increase charisma or some kind of leadership skill. It just makes you taller. Sort of a joke, maybe a witticism, almost social commentary. Whatever it was, everyone liked it. And then here we get to how I use the item. The party is high level, having played for about a year. They killed a Hydra. This sword was in the lair. The bonus to hit and damage are okay, nothing great. But everyone thought it would be fun to have a sword that makes them taller. No one thinks about the odd wording that the owner of the sword, that it is the odd wording that the owner, quote unquote, of the sword that is made taller. A few weeks later, no one is thinking about the sword. The character that owns the sword is informed that a baron from a few counties over is bringing criminal charges against him, saying that the PC cursed him. The party has never heard of this guy and has no idea why the baron thinks he was cursed by the player character. Of course, during the trial, it comes to light that the curse the baron is talking about is that he suddenly became 4 inches shorter. He used divination to find out what happened to him, but divination always being unclear and finicky, the baron was only told who was responsible. One of the baron's ancestors owned the sword and was long ago killed trying to slay the Hydra. When he died, his eldest son inherited his property, including the sword, even though it was 100 miles away. The ownership transferred from father to son over the generations. So every time the old baron died, a new one inherited the title and ownership of the sword, the new baron grew 4 inches. Obviously, this became thought of as a supernatural manifestation of that person's divine right to rule. So now a PC is in a court case with the baron, who is not at all interested in hearing that his family's supernatural height is not, in fact, a divine blessing, as everyone in their county believes, but is just some weird technicality of a pretty minor magic item lost hundreds of years ago. So this is a really fun item, right? It's got a grandiose name, the Arming Sword of Leadership, which sounds amazing, but what it does, it just makes you 4 inches taller. Now, you can have a lot of fun, I think, in many ways with that. And it is something that you could play into. It really is interesting because you could play with it in multiple ways, right? It could just be it makes you taller and that has zero material effect on the game. Your clothes. It'd be interesting. Does it go Hulk style and your clothes kind of, sort of, depending on what you're wearing, morph to fit you? Is it that kind of magic, or is it that you just bust out of what you're wearing and suddenly you have to have a whole new set of clothes made when your height increases? You could, as a GM, you could totally play this as having some kind of charisma effect, though maybe it's dangerous because then everyone just starts making really tall characters. Because there's usually, I think he's playing a custom system, his own game system, but I mean, usually there's, I think I'm kind of D&D. I don't know in all the editions. I could probably pull the DMG and find some kind of height weight table that cross references all these things about your strength, minimum, maximum, all that stuff. For the most part, those heights are kind of free. If you want to be short, you can be short. If you want to be tall, you want to be tall. And I think a lot of folks, when they want to be heroic, tend to want to be tall, at least if they're playing humans. You don't get a lot of people who want to play like a really short human, but I'm not saying that nobody does. But this would definitely, if you all of a sudden gave a charisma kind of bonus to height, that might influence character building. But other than that, it's a lot of fun. And I obviously like the fact that it was, whether it was thought about beforehand or after the fact, that in the fiction of the game, that this had them finding that sword and getting that power not only had a positive effect on them, but somebody hundreds of miles away, it gave a very negative effect. And therefore that person was looking for restitution. And I think those kinds of, I don't want to say minor, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's saying, I can't tell. That's the one thing. Looking at his stats, he's saying that the +8 to hit, the percentages, yeah, 8% is not that much, but it's kind of +2, a little bit less than +2 in a D20 kind of sense, if assuming it's kind of going to 100. +3 to damage. I don't know what the damage scale is, so we don't know. But it's fun. And it's something that you could see, because I could see somebody in power. I guess what I'm saying is that maybe for a fighter in an adventuring party, this sword compared to other magic swords is not as good, because the height advantage doesn't really help you necessarily. You could maybe argue if you were already tall. I don't know. I as a GM probably wouldn't say, well, now suddenly you have an extra 5-foot reach or anything like that. I'm probably not going to give you that. And so if you're already as tall kind of as you want to be, you're not super short for some reason. It's probably not helping you. But for someone like a Baron, who, even if it has no mechanical effect, perceiving to be tall, especially if maybe by nature they're short, is a real benefit. And it has a grandiose name and potentially a grandiose past. That this becomes an item that in effect is minor, but maybe is worth more than its effect if you can find the right person. This would be, to me, this is a great thing that, hey, I don't want to use this myself because maybe I already have a sword that is literally +2, so say +10% to hit, and maybe does more damage and gives me some other effects that are actually practically useful to me. But if I was going to go see a lord, I would bring this as a gift if I'm trying to make a really good impression. And then when they all of a sudden they grow 4 inches and they feel like super badass, like that's a reflection on my gift. Suddenly it's like, look, I've made you appear grander, and oh my gosh, my lord, look at that. You know, your stature has grown this day. And then I as a player, like that's me. I did that. So I feel like that would give me a nice bump in terms of, reaction, how they feel about me, their relationship. A great gift, I guess, ultimately, right? A great gift for your Napoleonic local lord who maybe is shorter than they want to be. Nothing, who I believe plays in Dungeon Master Masterclass's game, says, it's always seemed weird to me that there are so many magic daggers and so few magic items that solve actual problems people have on a day-to-day basis. Do the people making magic items really want to increase the chance they can stab someone by 5%? Rings of protection from dysentery should be way more common than rings of protection from acid. This is my favorite magic item from the campaign I'm in now. That's DM'd by DMMC. The fire poker of home protection. This ornate fire poker has a bronze and wooden handle and a black iron body. It is 30 inches long and stout. It's also of miracle igneous, and it has, what was that res? What did res stand for again? Oh, the saving throw, basically 15%. Okay, I'll skip the particulars because it doesn't mean that much for us. If this item is kept and used in a dwelling with a fireplace, the structure of that dwelling will be incapable of burning or otherwise being damaged by fire. Items and creatures in the dwelling are not protected. We found the fire poker early in the campaign, and it has come up twice so far. In our 8th session, 2 PCs knew some of our enemies were staking out the house they rented. They decided to start a small structural fire so they could sneak away in the hubbub. When the house didn't catch fire, they panicked and thought the bad guys somehow heard them planning and used magic to stop the fire. After like 5 minutes of panic, someone remembered the fire poker. By the 27th session, we had moved the fire poker to an estate outside of town. We were defending it from some orcs that were raiding the area, and we wheel around a corner to find a group of orcs staring dumbfounded at a fire they started under a thatched roof, wondering why the flames weren't spreading. 2 nice moments of levity. But also, I really like when decisions or events are established, but then doesn't actually come up for months. It makes the game feel real and is my favorite part of this hobby. I mean, I agree on all counts. Now, we got kind of sidetracked by discussion because I feel like, and oftentimes in the fantasy campaigns that most of us, that I feel like the 5% chance to stab someone or not get stabbed someone is actually pretty worthwhile, given I feel like how often folks are in physical danger more than they're in fire danger. And of course, we went on a tangent, and I was pointing out rightly that in the ancient past that there were lots of things that were flammable in home, and fires were a big concern. I still wonder, and I don't know, I'd have to look into more deeply, because my feeling is that the fires, once they get out of hand, are more likely to burn down a whole place than, say, in modern times. But I still wonder if the actual percentage of something catching fire is super much greater because, as it was pointed out, you're in a world that's filled with flammable stuff. But I think given that people were a lot more aware of it and also around, but I also know that you were living in a world that was surrounded by wood. So when the Great Fire of London starts and it starts to spread, it's like it's game over. Or the fire in Rome, what Caligula, was it Caligula? Fine, no, who was it? Who was it that played the fiddle? I can't remember, which I think is apocryphal. But anyway, once these fires get a hand, they go. In any case, I think that there's some interesting ideas about thinking of magic as, so I guess the takeaway here is, which I think is interesting for anyone in their world, it was Nero. Thank you, roll for success. Is that you should probably think about magic and what are the real threats in the world. And then magic, you would think that magic being the ultimate tool in a way would face. So if you are in a world in which fire and those kinds of calamities are the most common, and maybe violence within this, I don't know, settled culture, settled world. I don't want to use, I hate the word settled. I don't know though. Societal world, the world that's dominated by organized cultures as opposed to the wilderness. If that is a bigger concern, then it makes sense that wizards would, I would hope, at least the good ones, would be trying to create solutions for that. Now, that being said, I think regardless of what, as we see in our own politics, regardless of what may be the biggest threat in the world, like say hunger or global warming, leaders will still go to war. There's reasons why a lot of countries have all this military surplus and haven't found these other cures yet. Why? Even though we'd say, well, are a couple of hundred nukes going to make a big difference at the end of the day? Nope. So why aren't we maybe taking those and turning into something else? Well, you know, people have designs, and that's probably been true throughout history. So I would probably even say, which I didn't even think about on the political standpoint, I would still say that maybe it makes sense from a who's in power doing things to stay in power that military might trump all. But it's a really neat idea, and it's something I think that should be maybe we should be more thoughtful about that than we are. And then what that does is it creates interesting niches for items, because I would not have thought of having a fire poker of home protection. But they did, and it is, and the world is all the better for their thinking of it. So it's a really cool item. I like that it has a very, it's just kind of can be sitting there. It has a very powerful use, right? But very niche. It's, you got to be in a house. It's got to be in the fireplace. So you can't carry it around with you. You know, you could maybe take it to an inn if you wanted to, and then kind of put it near the fireplace when you come to the inn, so the inn doesn't burn down while you're there. But of course, then if you try to remove it, someone might yell at you and call you a thief if they see you trying to sneak off with the fire poker, even if you covertly slipped it there yourself. Something you could certainly bring with you. Maybe if you were going to a lord's house or someone, right? You could think of all kinds of interesting uses for it. Just there, hey, this is our sort of semi-permanent home base for the moment. Let's bring our poker here, and it saves us from a major concern, because as was pointed out in the example, even if you're not concerned about them just natural or accidental fires, the fact is that, yeah, if I'm playing as the orcs and the orcs are coming to attack you and try to ambush you in your home, or attack you in your home and just whatever, surround you, the obvious thing in most homes is to set the thing on fire. Hey, we want to get them out of this house. Oh, thatched roof, it's made. Okay, we're going to set it on fire. So it's really great. I'm going to skip through our going back and forth. Here I'm going to come to my item, which is from a game I ran, not my current game, but a game I ran previous to this. I don't know why sometimes Windows decides to pop up stuff like that. Oh, I don't know. Okay. Oh, well, that's fine too. Let me see. Does it actually say kept and used in the dwelling? I feel like, well, I guess what I'm interpreting is the used in a dwelling with a fireplace. If you're using a fire poker, it's got to be in the fireplace, unless you can think of another place to use it. I mean, maybe specifically you could try to get into the gray area of, could you come into an inn, kind of tap the fire with your fire poker and then take it upstairs with you? Maybe. But that's just my interpretation. You could interpret it however you'd like. Okay, so here's my, where was it? Oh, I went up instead of down. Here's mine. And I made, as I like to do, I threw together an image. It was actually hard. So there are interesting things that are hard for the AI images, AI kind of stuff to figure out. And this is going to be, I mean, they're going to, I guess, I won't say fortunately, they're going to get better at it over time, which we'll do whatever. But it is interesting when you start trying to twist the machines to kind of give you something that you want. But I just did this recently. This wasn't an image that I came up with originally. So this is called the Book of Callus Lightbringer. I'm going to read my own description. This was a magic book that held the spirit of an ancient philosopher monk named Callus Lightbringer. Originally, the book was created to preserve the knowledge and history of a holy school and monastery. Callus sacrificed himself to become an immortal guide to future knowledge seekers. Unfortunately, the monastery was not long after abandoned and subsequently forgotten, and over the millennia, his mind trapped in the book, Callus went quite mad. In the game, when the sarcophagus that interred Callus's body was disturbed and the book taken, it broke part of the binding enchantments, allowing some of Callus to bind to the mind of one of the party. Callus lived there for a time until he found a way to escape entirely. So the idea of the book was the party had gone to a location, and my concept of this location was it was a set of caves that had been manipulated and carved out into a monastery, which also became a school. And then the school, it just kind of, the faith, the philosophical school, it just died out. Went out of favor. Students kind of started to trickle in. And this guy, Callus Lightbringer, was one of the last sort of master monks, head monks of this monastery. And as he was getting old and dying, the idea became that we could have this book with him in it, so that hopefully, because the idea is that, well, this isn't going to be forever, right? We're just going through a rough spot and we're going to come back. But if it's in a generation or two, someone's going to come back here and they're not going to understand anything. They're not going to know what we were doing. They're not going to know about this place. So you're going to sort of go through this transformation. We're going to kind of, we're sort of going to mummify your form while you're alive. We're going to pass your consciousness into this book, and then someone could come and get the book, and then the book, which has stuff written in it, and your spiritual presence, Callus, will then be able to inform new students. So if we're going to need in a generation or two, a new monk's going to show up, and they're going to be thirsty for knowledge, but they're not going to have the background. They're not going to have the context to get it. They may only have heard bits and pieces, whatever. They have incorrect information. You're going to be able to come in and sort of teach them and create a new line of philosopher monks, and then we can reopen the school and everything will be great. And this was wonderful, but it didn't come to pass when they sealed them away and they did this thing, and then things went south, and then the whole place kind of lay dormant. Of course, monsters moved in, and just all that stuff happens. And then however long later, adventurers show up. They found the now kind of hidden entrance to this tomb, and they found the book, and they took the book, but then they disturbed the sarcophagus. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I think there was like a crit, one of those crit miss kind of things, and I ended up rolling. I think I rolled on a table. I don't remember exactly. It was a while ago. I don't remember how all the mechanics came up, but that's where I got this concept of, I think I might have even used like Mythic or something to generate sort of what happens when this kind of thing happens, because it wasn't what was supposed to happen, right? Because the idea was that the person comes as a student and picks up the book. They're going to be deferential, right? They're going to respect the sarcophagus. They're not looters. So they took the book, but then they kind of roughed up and opened up, and I think they even may have messed with his body. And again, I think something happened that made it kind of even worse. So what happens? This is where I got the idea that there was some connection here, and that this thing was sort of broken, and then it sort of morphed into, I think, the person who ended up, whatever they tripped or whatever thing they did and bonked the sarcophagus ended up being the one that got this little transfer of consciousness of Callus from the book to them. Now, I remember there was some information here that was obviously would have helped them, or data. This book and Callus was going to give them data on this dungeon, because there was this thing called the Black Pool, and stuff was happening with it, and Callus knew about it because this was something from way back. This wasn't a new phenomenon. He had a lot of information, but of course he was also a little bit mad, so he wouldn't say things. It was very much, everything was very enigmatic and strange coming out of his mouth. So you had kind of, or his his virtual mouth, he was kind of he could make a mental kind of connection, I think, with whoever was reading the book. So it wasn't like he was talking out loud. He was sort of talking to the reader, and then he was talking in the person's mind. and just I guess I'll go through it because why not? They ended up leaving the dungeons. They ended up getting the natives who had taken over the dungeon ended up kicking them out. It was very fun. I had these really short. I kind of based them on kobolds, but they weren't kobolds. But they had staked out. They lived in part of this. I had these in it. I had sort of factionalized this dungeon space, and they had a part of it, and they had some other parts of it were different, but they had this part, which is kind of where the entrance to where the party showed up, and they had put stakes with skulls and things on it to kind of basically call out this entrance. It's like, yeah, this is our home, right? This is our keep out, and the party decided to camp right there. So it's really interesting stuff with these creatures who were using a lot of hit and run ambush tactics. There were multiple exits from this dungeon, and they would creep out of these other exits and come around. And when the party's trying to rest at the camp, all of a sudden the rocks and things are being thrown at them. When they would try to chase down them, they would kind of try to melt away into the back into the surrounding wilderness and go back or go up. At one point they chased them on top because it was on top of a hill. They chased them to the top of the hill, and they saw there were kind of other holes, and and finally what happened at the end of it was the party had gotten kind of worn down. They lost one of the players died. One of the player characters, not the players, one of the player characters died to a poison spider bite, which then caused one of the hirelings to run off. The player took over one of the other hirelings. They went in, and these creatures had set up, I forget what, shriekers. They'd set up kind of a field of shriekers that sort of cultivated in one of the hallways, and the shriekers went off, and then they started to see that there was something else back here that was sort of looming out of the darkness, and the party didn't like the look of that. And I think they might have, I don't know if they confronted it, I forget, but at some point they were coming back. And then the creatures, I think, sensing that the party's not doing that great, like this is our chance. There was a troglodyte or troglodyte-like creature that they had sort of penned in and kind of had as I don't know if a pet, but they basically had it there, and they unleashed. They sort of undid their little gates and things and let this troglodyte out, and then the troglodyte came out. And the party's back at the camp thinking that they left the cave. Oh, okay, that must be all right. But, their camp is right in front of the cave. So the troglodyte then just comes out of the cave and whacks down one of them. And I was using dying rules. They weren't dying right at 0. And then it was great because we were playing by post, and I was doing initiative every round, and I was doing individual initiative. And it came down to and I had done the rolls for the monster up front. They were hidden, but I had them. And the monster, I forget what they rolled for initiative. It was kind of middle of the road, but it had to do with the fact that it came down to, okay, the monster, I saw their hit rolls, I saw their damage rolls, and they had multiple attacks. This troglodyte thing was going to kill if the characters didn't A, beat the initiative, B, hit with both of their attacks for both of them, and then C, do a certain amount of damage, they were going to die. Because if it got down to the monster's turn, it was whack, and it was over and done. And they did it. They rolled, boom, they got the hits, they put it down, and I let them know kind of how close it was. And then, but they ended up going back and kind of leaving this place behind, and then deciding to go off on another adventure. The Callus character lived on in the back of this guy's mind, also in the book. And then what ended up happening was I guess it's something that I like as a trope. The character got killed by an owlbear, and the Callus decided to make a deal and say, hey, I'll bring you back. I can help bring you back, but I'm getting a bigger share of the brain. I've been in this little corner. It's been nice, but it's kind of accidental, and I don't really have much. I'm coming back, but you got to let me in. And the character agreed, and then Callus came in. Character got their character type was flipped to undead. They couldn't eat anything. In fact, if they ate, it made them ill. And there was a couple other things that happened. But they survived for a while, and then they ended up waking up basically a war machine, kind of a walking, one of those walking alien machines from War of the Worlds. And it was kind of this, And I use a lot of, I like to use the kind of sort of oracles and inspirational sort of things to give stuff. And then in this moment, I think I rolled something. I was like, oh, it's really interesting. And I started putting it together. It's like, well, Callus has this really strong now mental kind of, he's been doing this thing, and okay. And like here, and now that everything's been weakened, I was like, he probably could jump. He probably could jump into something, especially if something didn't have a will to stop him. And this machine, it wasn't self-aware. It was maybe mechanically aware, maybe kind of like, like we might think of an AI now, that it might have like a drone. It's got commands, it can do stuff. It's got kind of got some sort of brain things going on, but it's not alive. It's not a living being, but it has, the things are kind of there. And I was like, yeah, I think that might make sense. I rolled some dice, and Callus's spirit jumped in, took over the walking machine, and tromped off into the sunset. Unfortunately, that campaign ended before I really had a chance to flesh out, well, what was Callus doing out there? Does he just come around? What the deal was. So somewhere Callus is still walking around in a war machine, enjoying his newfound freedom. And that's kind of what we're going to go through in this thread as well. I'm answering some questions. Brian Smith wrote up a few magical torches. I'm going to quote from his post. The idea being that some magic shops will sell quote unquote odds and ends in a box by the door, things they never spent the effort to identify, or did and found it not worth pricing very highly. These would include consumables that basically also have a random effect. These are like rough drafts of item enchanters, or maybe just sat around and the magic has gotten a bit stale. Torches, potions, and mundane items and the like. So he's got some torches here. So one is a ghost fire torch, cool blue flame, emits no heat, causes no damage. The next one's a dowsing torch. Once lit, the torch pulls itself violently towards the nearest source of water in which to douse itself. I think you want to give that one to your enemies. You meet an adventuring party you don't like. Say, hey, take this torch. The key torch. Once lit, a glimmering key of bronze appears in the flame. It can be retrieved by taking 1d4 fire damage. If torch is extinguished, the key vanishes. One thing be interesting is what the key actually does. Is it a magic key? What's the effect of this key? Inquiring minds want to know. Trailing torch leaves behind a faint glowing trace of the path of the torch for 20 feet. The trail slowly dissipates after 1 minute of the torch going out. And then mirror torch. Everything the torchlight falls on is projected 50 feet ahead in a blurry, illusory duplicate. That one's really cool. But I feel like that's a hard effect to adjudicate, because everything the torchlight falls on is projected 50 feet ahead. So you really have a cube, and then you have to think about that cube is projected 50 feet ahead. I'd have a hard time, I think. I mean, at least I'd have to think about it. But you could do some really neat things in there, especially if you don't even think about it in a dungeon. For example, what if you knew, let's say you're spending the night in a castle, and you get wind that somebody's going to come and kill you, and not necessarily the Lord, somebody who maybe doesn't intimately know the castle, but they know, your third room on the right on the second floor, whatever. So maybe one of the other party members replaces a torch, assuming that they're using torches inside. I know, probably candles, but whatever. And then does it in a way so that they project a wall where your door is, so you've got this hallway, and it's got, on the floor ceiling is probably going to look pretty much the same. I mean, okay, if they're using rugs on the floor, it might not, but chances are, maybe, even though it's blurry, maybe if you throw that over there so that when they're coming, like, okay, third door from the left, and they're in a hurry, they're not checking closely. So instead of seeing a door, they see some sort of blurry wall, and maybe they pass it by. It could be some really neat sort of edge cases for using it, interesting ways, which I always like. Also, a magic item that's not going to give you, it's not a win button, but you can really be clever about it in certain ways. Or maybe you want to hide a trap door from somebody. You have that torch there for a little bit, and now it's projected some plain area floor where imagine a dungeon like that, where this torch is just sitting on the wall and it seems to be in good repair. And so maybe people say, oh, I'll light this torch. Then maybe you light it, and then that therefore covers the floor where there's a trap. I mean, maybe the blurriness, I'd have to play around, and you have to think about, well, how how blurry is it? Is it really noticeable? Because at that point, you're actually drawing attention to the thing you're trying to hide, or is it more on you have to inspect it? But I like that stuff. Cool beans. Brian Smith's got some more. Also, I figured healing potions are a magic item. Why shouldn't they all be different from one another? Maybe some with more surprising effects as well. Unexpected effects of healing potions. This one's kind of like a table. 1. You glow from within, making your vascular structure clearly visible for the next 30 minutes. Enemies will attack you first in combat. That's not so fun. 2. You find it difficult to speak and your skin becomes dry and chalky. You have to yell to be heard and gain resistance to non-magical weapon attacks for 30 minutes. I guess because of the chalk. Makes sense. 3. Cold spreads through your body, healing minor wounds and causing your breath to crystallize in ice. The frosty breath causes disadvantage on persuasion checks for 30 minutes. 4. You sweat profusely and your eyes/nose start to run. You find it difficult to manipulate small items. Disadvantage on checks to hold on to small items or use tools for 30 minutes. 5. As the liquid makes its way to your stomach, a golden glow is emitted from your mouth while open. Opening your mouth casts dim light in your immediate area for the next 30 minutes. 6. As soon as the stopper is pulled, the red liquid rushes to the top in a foamy spout. You quickly drink it down, and a tingling spreads through your body. It is impossible to drink this without being noticed. I don't know if that's a bad thing, given it's a healing potion, but I suppose if you're trying to be super stealthy, that would be bad. 7. As the stopper is pulled, the liquid instantly evaporates in a cloud of red mist. You inhale deeply and catch the faint scent of sweet flowers as your muscles feel rejuvenated and relaxed. And then finally, 8. You upend the bottle and a clumpy red liquid slowly pours out. With a little chewing, you get most of it down, and it feels as if you ate a 3-course meal. Yeah, these are all really cool. Actually, because I'm not a huge healing potion fan, but I'm thinking I could really see repurposing this for your sort of herbal poultices and kind of your herbal home remedies. So you go to someone and you're hurt, the local farmer's wife's like, oh, drink this down, boyo, and you drink it or eat it. I'd love to have a table of kind of similar effects like this. Like, yeah, it is going to heal you potentially so much, but then it's also this other thing's going to happen. Why? Because it's almost these are all kind of one of a kind. Even if the person knows all the plants are different, all kinds of things are different. Individual specimens are different. Everything's not quite the same. Nothing is measured precisely. So it's just pinches of this and tosses of that and eyes of newt and wings of bat and all that stuff. And then when you drink it, you could have all these cool things happen. They're really great ideas. There's nothing that's super crazy, but could certainly be inconvenient if they happen at the wrong time, which again is things I like. And of course, if you know about these, if you're able to identify these side effects, you could also use them to great effect. Either because you want to say something like, look, the guy's got gold in his mouth because he swallowed your gold, and you gave the guy the little healing potion, and he opens his mouth to deny this charge, and a gold glow comes out, which, maybe makes people think, aha, the gold's down there. Something like that. Or, I always have the golden voice of truth. When I'm telling the truth, my mouth glows like gold. And then you sneak a swig, and then when, you're talking, the gold glows, so everyone thinks you're telling the truth, right? These are what I like, because you can come up with all kinds of fun ways to do it. And if you don't, then they just end up being kind of fun, interesting details. Son of Sofa Man says, these potions are all great ideas. Agreed. All right. And here's one from Reverence Pavane, or Pavan, I'm not sure. Apologies if I got it wrong. I generally systemize my magic items along the veins of a magic sword character class I wrote way back in the day. This was really an NPC class where a fighting man could take a sword, horse, and or armor as a henchman and have it earn experience and become an heirloom item. Whilst I don't use this method anymore, it did form the basis of how I design magic swords, and most magic items are based around this same sort of system. It is craftsmen that make magic items in my game. Enchantments are only temporary and tend to break whatever they are acting upon when they expire, unless that is a masterwork item, effectively a +0 magic item. One category of magic swords are the Bane swords. These are the classic +1/+3 swords of OD&D, except because I use class-based hit point damage, they do double damage. Remember that back in the day, the damage die was D6, so this change keeps the same average damage of the weapon. They are considered magic swords of the 4th rank, requiring a 5th level craftsman. Anyway, everyone knows how a Bane sword is made. You perform the final temper of the blade in the living essence of the targeted creature. Of course, if you don't actually know what you are doing, you will probably end up with a bad or broken blade, or one whose target is not what you want. For example, using an orc warrior named Grash to temper the blade might result in the Bane of Orcs you intended, or possibly a Bane of Warriors or a Bane of Grash. These are naturally cursed items because of how they are made. Having a Bane blade in a party results in a -1 reaction from the affected creature, even if it is sheathed. Actually, drawing the Bane blade results in a -3 reaction from the affected creatures. Something to consider when one is carrying that Bane of Dragons you found in that heavily charred and partially melted part of the dungeon. There is a way of making a greater Bane weapon that does not have this effect, but this is considered a magic sword of the 3rd rank and needs to be forged in a death-aspected elemental forge by at least a 7th level weaponsmith. Not a trivial undertaking. Well, I don't know what that stuff is, but I love the sound of a death-aspected elemental forge and high-level smiths of any kind. I really love this idea. I love the fact that it's given this fictional way. Well, how do you get a +3 sword against, giants, dragons, orcs, people, whomever? Well, it's a nasty thing. So even if you think like, well, hey, this is the classic, we're gonna have to. You can't be. I feel like anyway, especially if you're playing with good evil. Even I would say with law, right? That this is the classic tool of the enemy. You may think that this thing is useful, and it is, like the ring, like all kinds of these things, but you're going down a bad path because having to essentially sacrifice a living creature of that type in a real systematic and mechanical way. This is not in the heat of battle. You kill an orc with this and suddenly it becomes Bane of Orcs. Like, no, you are in a smithy, you are at a forge, you are going through this process. You're going to have a captive, I guess, tied up, paralyzed, otherwise bound, whatever creature of the type you want to make the Bane sword of. It's got to be alive, and you're going to have to sit there and just say, okay, we're quenching time, like you might see on one of those shows on the History Channel or whatever. Like, hey, we're coming in, forged in fire. All right, time to go in the quench. But instead of going in water or oil, now you're stabbing it into the guts of this creature. I don't think there's any way around it. That is chaos. That is evil, depending on how you want to do your alignment. And I think even if the players aren't involved in the forging of it, when they run across it, I would hope that they might have some misgivings of, oh, we use this, we take it. Ooh, this is not good news. But it is really strong. So I like that has that, oh man, this is really strong. Maybe we don't care about the reaction stuff, but then it's also just the nature of the blade itself. I think you can have a lot of interesting fun and with that. If you're a lawful paladin type or cleric type, let's say it's not a sword, but it's a mace. Even if you feel like, yeah, this is really good versus these evil creatures, but it's not. I know that it wasn't a good way that we got to this Bane state. This Bane, the baning of this sword, this weapon, it's bad. And so that, again, I really dig it. He says, you feel your alignment shift. And then Reverence has another one. The Hexed flower is a natural magic item in that it is a delicate yellow flower plant that is often found near the site where destructive weather control magic was used. They tend to emerge in the next spring along with other flowering plants. There will be 1d6 6-petaled flowers on each plant, but generally only one plant at any event. Druids and herbalists can preserve the flower as a dried herb or even transplant it to a pot. When the dried flower is worn in the lapel, it gives a saving throw of +4 against weather-aligned magic, including lightning bolts and lightning strikes. However, each time a save is made, the dried flower loses a petal. A properly preserved Hexed flower starts with 6 petals. A found magic item will have 1d6 petals left. After all the flower petals are gone, after all the flower petals are gone, the flower no longer gives a bonus to saves. As a living plant, it extends this protection to everyone and everything in a 10-foot radius. However, it is a very fragile plant and ill-suited to jarring and shock, which will cause it to lose 1d6 petals from each flower each time. When all 6 petals are lost, it loses all save bonuses. It will naturally lose its petals at the end of summer, but if properly cared for, it will bloom again in the spring with another 1d6 flowers. Note that attempting to farm these plants with weather magic have been noticeably unsuccessful and rather damaging to the environment. Another great magic item. It's cool because it's really subtle. You see a guy and he's got this flower in his lapel. Oh, how cheeky. And then you go to blast him with a lightning bolt, and then one of the petals falls. And he's like, or at least he gets a better saving throw. So he might still get zapped. But really cool. nice story about it, nice fictional reason, like the Bane swords. We're given a little bit of the genesis of, oh, it's not just the thing you find, but oh, here's how you get it if you wanted to. Here's the folks that can deal with it. You get a little bit of some rules, or at least the outlines of kind of mechanics for tending it or trying to cultivate it. When you find it, it's something that you could have. You could put that in your sort of, I don't know, sub-hex kind of features. You run across a field. Maybe you decide that field has some hexenfleur in it. So then you can think about, oh, what happened in this field? Or maybe you have an event that happened. We're like, oh, yeah, there was some kind of unnatural storm. Maybe you decide to throw some hexenfleur in there, which is just great for just setting the tone and the atmosphere and giving a context to what happened here, even if it's not mostly invisible. But then it's also something that the party can, or NPCs or any creatures can take advantage of. I would even go so far as to say I'd love to hear if there's something that happens if you eat it or do some other things. What happens if you crush the hexenfleur petals or do something like it? I think you could even, if you wanted to, of course, think about, well, what other things could you do with this if you did other treatments besides drying the petals and just keeping them or doing it? What if you crushed it and, here I have chrysanthemum in my tea. What if you took the buds, snipped the buds before they fully bloomed, and then made an infusion with them or did something else? Neat stuff. And also, look, it's not forever, right? You're going to have 1d6. All right, here's some comments. Now we get Son of Sofa Man, who is here in the chat. He was a minute ago, so hopefully he's still here. And I didn't think I was going to get all the way through the hour with these, but this is cool. I might just make it. Son of Sofa Man posted the Ricosa Wakey. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Ricosa Wakey is made of a semi-transparent blue crystalline material that twinkles in the faintest of light. Shaped like a traditional skeleton key and about 4 inches long, it is not intended to unlock any mechanical lock. It is a way key, and with it, access to the Ricosa microverse is possible. This way key was once owned by the Thalaman Ricosa, an elven necromancer, until it was acquired by the band of adventurers known as the Ears and Beard Brigade. A way key is a magical item that is used to pierce the planar veil, revealing an opening to a microverse. Each key is associated with one specific microverse, although each microverse may have multiple keys. Typically, the key is pressed against a solid surface large enough for a circular aperture of at least 5 feet across to form. A wall makes a fine surface for this purpose. When the key's activation word or phrase, its keyword, is spoken, a bright light appears at the point of contact. The light begins to spread in a circle, revealing the aperture to the associated microverse. A way key can take any form, and each is unique. A microverse, aka a nook or pocket dimension, is a minor plane of existence within the greater multiverse. Nooks have a finite volume ranging from tiny, a few feet across, to gargantuan, many miles wide, and can be used to securely store anything that fits. The space can be any shape, but it's often spherical, cubic, or some other platonic polyhedra. Nooks can be assumed to have gravity that operates perpendicular to the floor plane, which itself is at a right angle to the aperture. It is theorized that an infinite number of nooks exist, but very few are known. Access to a microverse and the items stored within is usually gained by using a way key, which can conveniently open an aperture on any solid surface large enough to support it. And the aperture is typically a 5-foot circle, which opens slowly over the span of 1 minute. As it opens, bright, arcing lights flash around its expanding circumference, accompanied by loud, crackling noises of magical energy, and often the whistling of air as it rushes through to balance the pressure on both sides. Physical objects can pass through the opening in either direction while the aperture is open, as long as they fit through the opening. The perimeter of an open aperture is clearly framed by scintillating light. An aperture remains open until closed by speaking the keyword again. Opening a second aperture will cause the first to close. When an aperture closes, it snaps shut instantly. Any item traversing an aperture when it closes will be severed in two, no saving throw. Microverse apertures can only be opened from the outside. No one knows what happens if a way key is used from within its associated nook. While a nook is sealed, no air can enter or escape. The only light in the nook is that which is brought in from outside. Living creatures within a sealed nook will eventually run out of breathable air unless some other provisions are made. This can happen very quickly for tiny nooks. Food, water, and waste contaminants are also problems that need to be addressed for prolonged stays. So, make yourself at home in the nook. Just don't stay too long. Another great idea. It reminds me of that his Dark Materials thing with that knife that slices through the multiverse and you can enter different dimensions. This is definitely, I like this better than a bag of holding. I think in some ways I like that it's more noticeable. You can use this, but certainly if you just do this in an inn, oh, I'm going to go to the door and go to my room in the inn and I'm going to open up my nook. Well, even if they don't see you, they're going to hear stuff. They're probably going to see weird lights flashing from under the door. And if you do this outside, you're going to see this whole nimbus of light and all this stuff crackling and everything. And so it's something that's really cool, but also has a very visible aspect that you need to deal with. Obviously, if you're in the comforts of your own space, that's fine. It also means that you can't just do it willy-nilly, because if you're in the wilderness and you don't have a big rock or something with a wall, you may not really be able to do it. Seems like you couldn't do it on grass or surface anyway. And then what would that do to the nook if you're opening the door in the floor of space? But then it becomes, I'm not sure, right? It would end up being really weird. And I think maybe it's not a flat surface. So you have some limitations. You have to be thoughtful of what you do. You have to be thoughtful about not being trapped inside. If you let somebody know your keyword, then you're on the inside doing some spring cleaning and someone goes like, "Hachamachamoo," and locks you in. Oh God, you're stuck. Of course, you could also play with that. If somebody is chasing you and you could jump through your aperture and then they're coming through the aperture and you say, "Hachamachu," then it slices them in half, which is also great. And I think the reason I like all this stuff is, it adds complexity, but the complexity leads to decision-making, stuff that you don't usually have to deal with the bag of holding. You just open it, you drop something in, close it. Sure, there's more meta about it now only because people try to game it up. But other than that, it's just kind of there. Whereas this one, really useful in many ways, more useful than the bag of holding, certainly more space. You can actually walk in it, all that kind of stuff for the most, but also has interesting things that you're going to have to deal with and stuff as a GM, where if you just start breaking this out willy-nilly, maybe someone can't catch you in the act, but I'm guessing somebody else who has knowledge of these hears the crackling, sees some of the light from around a corner, they're going to know you have a way key to a nook. Now suddenly you might have something that they want. Maybe they'll try to finagle to hear you speak the keyword or try to do something else, right? I love that stuff that just adds elements of, I guess, really decision-making and consequences. Really, there are consequences for using this device, as useful as it is. Son of Sofa Man says the noticeability was the exact intent. Oh, great. Well, I think you nailed that bit of it. And then DMMC comes back in with something more epic than the arming sword of leadership. And it was called, it's called the Cauldron of Lightning. A shallow copper bowl 5 feet in diameter and 1 foot deep. It balances delicately on a base only 5 inches across. The cauldron is filled with an unbearably luminous blue-white liquid, which is lightning. The liquid fills the cauldron to within an inch of its top. In prehistory, this exceptionally powerful weapon was created by, or came into the possession of, the figure known as King Rig. With it, King Rig united the Stam and later attempted to resist the expansion of Uma the Great in the Substratum Wars. After King Rig's defeat and death, the cauldron was entombed with Rig's body in a secret location. The cauldron weighs 450 pounds. And this is remember that, I'm going to skip the mechanics, but it's an old way, I guess, not arcane, but divine priest magic device. Excuse me. Anyone touching the cauldron suffers 5d10 lightning damage. Anyone with any amount of Stam ancestry that touches the cauldron may take 2 will checks. If they pass both, they become the cauldron's controller. Excuse me, again, I got something in my throat. While touching the cauldron, its controller may use one of the following abilities once per round. Lightning Blast. I'm not going to go through the specifics. I'm just going to mention the names because I think that's the most important thing at this moment. Lightning Blast, Lightning Cone. If the liquid spills from the cauldron, everyone within 50 feet suffers lightning damage proportional to the amount of lightning that's spilled. And then we have some mathematics I'm going to skip. If all the lightning is spilled from the cauldron is dispelled and no longer functions. Currently, 92% of the lightning remains in the cauldron. I wonder if it's possible to get some of that back. Can you? There must be a way. That'd be another interesting idea. Is how do you liquefy lightning to refill the cauldron? If you can become its controller, the cauldron can be used to cause a huge amount of damage, but it's going to be very difficult to move, and if it spills, it's going to destroy everything within 50 feet. I had a whole campaign planned that centered on this item. The idea was that the party would find the cauldron in King Rig's tomb in the first adventure, but the tomb was built around the cumbersome magic item with 2-foot wide passages such that the cauldron is impossible to remove. It's 5 feet across. As low-level adventurers, the party wouldn't have any way to get the cauldron out of the tomb that I could think of, besides hiring a bunch of laborers and dismantling the tomb. But while the party was arranging that, a resurgent Stam Kingdom bad guys would invade, and the tomb would end up behind enemy lines. The whole campaign would be dealing with the Stam invasion and their virtually indestructible demigod-like king. The party would remember the Cauldron of Lightning from so long ago and decide to go behind enemy lines, recover the cauldron, and use it to kill the evil God King. What a great story! Except, of course, that didn't happen. What actually happened was, in a moment of desperation during the first adventure, one of the PCs flipped the cauldron over before they had a chance to investigate. Doing so dispelled the cauldron, vaporized the PC and the body of King Rig, so well as destroyed everything in the room that would have told the PCs about the cauldron and its history. The campaign ended up being great. I just can't ever learn that lesson to not plan ahead. I mean, this is great on so many levels. The cauldron is cool, super powerful, but super unwieldy. So if you really like to think about it, I also like that, like a lot of these, there's a limit to the supply. In this case, as long as you don't move the cauldron, you can use it. It's powerful, but you got to be there with the cauldron, and you're not going to be able to lift it. It's going to be cumbersome to move. And when you're moving it, you're liable to spill more, which is a potential just to kill you, whoever's using it. And then also you're reducing the amount left. So it's really great if you can get it to a location. If you can get this to your stronghold and put it somewhere, then yeah, you can sit there on the battlements with this cauldron and be like, and just tossing lightning down all over the place. But of course, beware a catapult or something that might come, and forget destroying it, because maybe it's magic and you can't physically destroy it, but just knocking the thing over, and then it causes 50 feet radius of just pure mayhem, and then it's done. So it's really great with some really great drawbacks. And of course, the story also illustrates what can happen when you plan around something like that, and then something happens you don't expect. Now, kudos to DMMC for not going ahead and trying to, retroactively change the magic item. He created it, gave it its parameters, and in that creation process, they could have done anything, but this is what they did. Cauldron, liquid. That's how it works. And then when it got in the game, cauldron, liquid, this is how it works. And the PC, in some moment of desperation, goes, oh, there's a cauldron of bubbling blue stuff. Like, I'm gonna tip it over and spill it and hope it kills all my enemies. Well, it would have been tempting, super tempting, to kind of do like a little, like, look at your notes and go, oh, actually this other thing happens, or it'll refill, I promise. But they did. They stuck with it. The consequences were what they were, and it becomes a great sort of side story and lesson. And I think that takes courage to do, because in that moment, nobody knew anything about that but the DM. And so it was up to them to say, you know what, I'm going to stick with what I did. And I could see now the mistake that I made. I have made a mistake thinking I could count on what the party would do. And the thing is, too, this is the kind of thing we see on Reddit all the time, or maybe not all the time, but really often. Because if you think about, in this scenario, if we were going to go back to DMMC's original plan, there are so many points where this can go just horribly wrong. So they went horribly wrong at the front in terms of the plot, right? We tipped it over. We haven't even left the tomb yet, and we've already tipped over the thing and dispelled it, and we don't even know what it was, and we can't even get, because we destroyed anything around it. But let's fast forward. Okay, so let's just say in an alternate universe, fast forward, that they make it out of the tomb. Later on in the adventure, they are able to sneak out of enemy lines. Now, sneak behind enemy lines with a whole crew of folks to dig out this tomb. I don't know how that's going to work, but so be it. Now they get out of the tomb, but now they still have to march this thing. I don't know, what are they? I feel like it. I envision sort of a Raiders of the Lost Ark, what do you call it? The 10 Commandments, whatever, in the Ark. I'm like, there's a lost Ark. What's it called? The Ark. Or they have to carry it on some poles, some stout wooden poles, and they have to march it along. And what happens on the road? What happens? They got to get this thing to the bad guy's throne room, I guess. I don't know where this bad guy is. I mean, there are so many times where they could just one failed saving throws, something happens, somebody gets lucky, and then oops, over it goes, spills. That it probably was something that was sort of doomed from the start. But, one, they didn't retroactively try to fix it. And then two, I think that the danger would have been at that point that you would have tried to fix it going along. Because once you get closer to, oh no, we got to get it to the throne room. So I got to make all these changes so it gets to the throne room. And it just loses something. I think, anyway. I think this is much more fun. And it's a story that I'm sure is remembered probably better than it would have been if they had been able to nurse this powerful but very immobile magic item through that adventure. This is probably a story that everyone will remember. And it's an awesome item. I'm curious about that system. Is it sort of like I guess it's percentile based. This is the one thing, like, just for me, like, I don't want to track 92%. I think what I would do is I would just have kind of a usage die type issue and just use that. That to me is a really good use for a usage die because in that case, I don't care about ounces. It's got this many quarts left. I don't care. Just if I have a usage die, if it starts at 20 and then it's down, 20, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4. Then if it gets down to like 8, I can say, you're about halfway or less, right? I can give it, it's getting down there. And then of course you get down to, or maybe it's D10, you might say. I don't know. Then it gets down to 6. It's pretty low. Get down to D4. It's really low. That kind of thing. That to me is like a perfect usage die scenario because I'm never going to be super. I know that part of it here is that the percentage you spilled, but I feel like I would kind of do that. But that's just playing in kind of an OSR-ish game. And I have no idea what system we're playing. Well, look at that. Wouldn't you know it? I was able to go on about these and take up the entire Friday. I actually had some backups and I didn't even get there. We were able to do this a whole hour worth of material and not have to go to Reddit once, which I would love to make a regular feature. If you enjoy the sharing, if you have stuff you would like to share, go on over the forums. I posted this. Well, I posted in the forums. Probably not seen it, but I had an email issue that I didn't realize in the forums. I fixed it now. So if you registered and you didn't get an email, or you registered ages ago and you want to come back and you forgot your password, we were trying to reset it and it wasn't working, emails are working now. So come and interact with us. I am setting up a Discord. I am doing it. I am setting it up. I don't know how long it's going to take, so I'm just doing it in bits and bobs. I'm trying to set up the bot situation. That's what I'm working on right now. I am doing that. So that also will be happening at some point. But I don't know what the next theme will be. I'll probably think about it maybe today or over the weekend. So that's coming. But even if I don't have a theme, if you drop stuff in here, this is where I'm going to come to look. And I know what I covered today. And so just drop something in there. Let me know if there's anything particular about it. I love hearing more of the stories and the backgrounds and what happened with whatever it is, whether it's a person, place, thing, magic item, NPC, adventure, whatever. I want to really go through these things. I think they are really helpful for people to read, gives folks ideas, gives folks inspiration, all that good stuff. So this is really great stuff. That's all I got, folks, for reals. I don't think I have any other announcement things. Obviously, when I do actually launch the Discord, I will make an announcement about that. But yeah, other than that, have a great weekend or day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. If you're in here and you enjoyed it, if you give a thumbs up, that would be awesome. If you found yourself in here and you're not subscribed to the channel and you feel like subscribing, that would also be awesome. Otherwise, have a great rest of whenever, everybody. Game on. And I will talk to you later. Bye now.